Hi, I'm Jim Barnett. My mom used to say I was born with my motor running. I love to be on the go. I'm on a mission to check out as many interesting places and as many interesting people as I can. And along the way, I want to see who's got the best food. Hey, you're welcome to ride along, but I gotta go. We're headed for one of the oldest European settlements in the entire continental United States, a town that's been ruled by 5 different governments over its lifetime. And it just so happens to be the birthplace of naval aviation and home to the Blue Angels. Let's go check it out. Pensacola, Florida. Just like any town that's lucky enough to be on the Gulf of Mexico, it is beautiful here. Miles and miles of beaches, tourist attractions, hotels, condos, restaurants, it's all here. If you're looking for a vacation spot to soak up sunshine and warm breezes, Pensacola is definitely the place to just take it easy. They're not lying when they claim to have the world's whitest beaches. On the other hand, if you're the type who gets tired of just shaking the sand out of your shorts, if you like to look a little deeper and discover more than just sandy beaches, there's a gulf's worth of things to learn and spots to explore in Pensacola. To really understand this area, you have to understand this bay. Pensacola Bay is huge. The whole system covers 230 square miles and drains 11,000 square miles of land. And it's deep, too. So deep that present-day giants like this 732-foot tanker with a 27-foot draft can pass through. Centuries ago, a waterway like this was important when you were looking for a place to set up a new colony and defend it from your enemies. Ryan Arve, a local history expert, picks it up from there.
La Florida. That was the name given to the pretty much the whole southeastern region by Ponce de Leon in 1513.
But Ponce de Leon, he didn't settle the area. It wasn't until Spain felt some competition from other countries that she decided she had better jump on this real estate deal.
So Ponce de Leon comes and claims La Florida for Spain. And there are a lot of other Spanish explorers in subsequent years that come through this area on expeditions and charting maps. None of them stay, though.
Okay.
And so with other encroachment by other European powers, the French and the British, Spain decides we're going to...
We better jump on that.
We better jump on it.
That was in 1559, and they had their guy, Tristan de Luna, ready to settle in this area they called La Florida. But it wasn't a done deal. It seems, just like any potential buyer, Spain was looking at different neighborhoods, so to speak.
So there's 2 spots that they're looking at. Modern-day Mobile Bay or Pensacola Bay. Back then it was called Ocuse. So
both deep water bays.
Deep water harbors, yes, and they're both attractive. They decided to go with Pensacola because they thought there was a more of a narrow channel to get into the bay, which they thought, get this, made it hurricane-proof.
Maybe not hurricane-proof, but a good setup to fight enemies.
Well, they actually thought that it would make a pretty good buffer against storms coming in from the Gulf, which unfortunately they were sadly mistaken.
Yeah, right.
Because about a month after Luna lands, a hurricane pretty much wipes out almost his entire fleet.
Wow.
Sinks all but 3 of his ships. Most of the provisions were still on those ships. And so what started out as an expedition of about 1,500 men, after about 2 years, dwindles down to about 400. And at that point, that the king decides to bring everybody home.
It'll be a few more years before Spain tries to settle Pensacola again. But in the meantime, they settle a spot we call St. Augustine, Florida.
There's a little bit of a friendly rivalry between Pensacola and St. Augustine.
I wondered about that. Can you explain, just so viewers don't have to take my word for it, explain the difference in dates and significance between Pensacola and St. Augustine?
All right, so St. Augustine has the distinction of being the oldest permanent settlement in the continental United States. Pensacola was an earlier settlement by a couple years, but it was not successful. It was a failed settlement.
The Spanish came back to Pensacola and ruled the area for over 100 years, but it seems there was always some other country wanting to take over control. I'm going to test you here. Okay, I'm going to see how fast you can name off the progression of countries that were in control here. Okay, it's 5, but
They go back and forth. Right?
Okay, you ready?
Sure.
Ready? Here we go.
Okay, so it starts with Spain. In 1719 to 1721, we have the French. Not much happens during that time period. It goes back to Spain. In 1763, after the Treaty of Paris, it goes to Britain. Britain's here from about 1763 to 1781. Spain decides in 1781 the American Revolution is a good opportunity to come in and get Spain or Florida back from the British. They were not allies with the Americans, but they thought, hey, if we help them out, the colonists, it'll be a bonus. They are successful in getting Florida back from the British. The Spanish are here again until 1821, when it becomes an American territory. It is American territory.
You're up to about 30 seconds.
1821 to 1845, when it becomes a state. 27th state of the United States, but in 1861 it becomes the 3rd state to secede from the Union, when it becomes Confederate for 17 months, and about 1868 it's admitted back to the Union.
And it's been that way ever since.
Ever since.
So a thumbnail sketch of Pensacola history in about 45 seconds.
That's why we are the city of 5 flags. That's where the nickname comes from.
All that fighting and countries going back and forth was because of the bay. I told you it was important. Back when long-distance travel, long-distance commerce, and military actions against other countries meant using ships, the bay was strategic to everything.
It was a military town initially. We are sitting on the site of the old governor's house within the original boundaries of the fort, Spanish and British fort. Even after the United States took over and this fort fell into disrepair, they built new forts out at the mouth of the bay. Fort Pickens, Fort McRae, and Fort Barrancas.
You can visit a couple of those forts when you're in the area. Fort Barrancas sits on the inland side of the bay. The newer parts of the fort were built by Britain and the United States, but the original fort to guard the entrance to the bay was built by the Spanish. Today, it's open to the public as part of the Gulf Islands National Seashore. Okay, now that you've seen Fort Barrancas, it's a good time to hop in the car and drive to the other side of the bay, out to the western end of Santa Rosa Island. That's where you'll find Fort Pickens, the largest fort built to guard the harbor and protect Pensacola. Today, it's also part of the Gulf Islands National Seashore. Pickens was built by the United States and opened in 1834. Look at the firepower here. This Rodman cannon is one of the largest smoothbore cannons ever built and shot out 15-inch cannonballs. That's the size of a beach ball. Just the barrel on this thing weighs 50,000 pounds. I'm 6'4", and my fingertips can touch an 8-foot ceiling. If you were a wooden ship trying to attack Pensacola, you needed to think twice. Fort Pickens was important throughout World War II. By then, the United States had built a Navy yard and a naval air station in Pensacola. This area was, and still is, strategic to national security. With World War I sea battles, and later the attack on Pearl Harbor, and German submarine attacks in the Gulf, the U.S. knew they had to reinforce their protection around this area. So, they expanded the fort using reinforced concrete, which was stronger than the original brick. They also installed bigger, more modern, and more accurate defense systems. Battery Langdon, otherwise known as the Big Bang, was Pickens' most powerful gun. It could fire a 12-inch shell and hit a target 17 miles out to sea. The first guy to fire it had his hat blown off and his pants split. If you're shooting at something 17 miles away, you need to have some way to aim the shell. Spotters would take simultaneous compass readings on the ship and relay that information to the plotting room, where they also factored in the wind direction and wind speed. The triangulated coordinates were then sent to the gun crew. If it all worked out correctly, the enemy ship would be sunk. When you head out to Fort Pickens, give yourself plenty of time to enjoy the rest of the Gulf Shores National Seashore and Santa Rosa Island. Inside the national park, there's miles and miles of beautiful beaches, picnic areas, walking paths, and acres of natural vegetation. Outside the park, but still on the island, there's famous Pensacola Beach with breathtaking amusements and great restaurants. The most talked about spot on the beach has to be the doghouse. Hot dogs any way you can imagine. And trust me, there's nothing better than a foot-long chili dog on world-famous Pensacola Beach. When you head back into Pensacola, take a little time to visit Pensacola's Veterans Memorial. You'll be going right by it. It pays reverence to every modern war and even has a replica of Washington, D.C.'s Vietnam Wall. It's easy to feel the emotions of an entire nation right here in this quiet little park. Pensacola as a city is well aware of its rich history, and they make a real effort to protect it and preserve it. The place that exemplifies that more than any other is historic Pensacola Village, a once blighted neighborhood that's now the center of Pensacola history. Oh look, that's where we left Ryan, our local history expert.
If you want to be specific about it, I'm the Living History Coordinator. Approximately, we own about close to 22 buildings.
Okay.
As part of the historic Pensacola Village experience, there are 5 self-guided museums, and then there are 4 historic structures that we tour. The 4 structures that we tour are 2 Victorian homes, an 1805 house, and Old Christ Church, which was built in 1832.
Okay, so they're not all from one period in history.
No, we have a complete arc of history going from the last Spanish colonial period up through the Victorian era.